Welcome to the Yours in Marketing podcast. On this episode, we interview Joel Klettke, who is the founder of Business Casual Copywriting and Case Study Buddy. Now, Joel was asked to come on the show because he actually is responsible for helping us at Directive Consulting with our copy on the new website design that we did. And it really became very apparent very quickly that this guy knows what he's talking about. He knows what kind of copy converts and really speaks to people. He has this simple but yet really elegant way of connecting with people on a human level that comes through even on website copy. And it's really interesting to hear his thoughts about how B2B leaders, how websites in general can make their copy more engaging, more interesting, and ultimately how you can convert them into better and more qualified and quantified customers. So it's really effective for people that are listening out there that maybe your website copy is not exactly where you want it to be. Maybe you're using a little kind of robotic language. You're not thinking about the user experience in terms of the messaging as much. This is going to be a really effective use of your time to listen to this interview because Joel is the best at what he does. That's why we hired him. So he is doing masterful work out there, also working on Case Study Buddy, building case studies for all kinds of businesses. Case studies are really, really effective and powerful tool to help with your sales and also just reinforce your current clientele on what you're capable of doing. So check those things out. Without further ado, let's hop into the interview with Joel Klettke. Today's guest, we have Joel Klettke on with us. Hi, Joel. How are you doing?
Doing good. Staying warm. That's the important thing.
So Joel is a copywriter extraordinaire. He is solely responsible basically for our copy on our website we just discussed, and he has been doing some masterful things with copywriting for a long time. He also has a deep background in SEO and digital marketing in general. So we are really thrilled to have him on today. And we're going to ask him some hard-hitting questions.
Yeah, and I'd like to start there, Joel, because I have a tough one lined up first, and this comes from the heart. How did you become the best-looking man in the world?
Oh man, aside from genetics and DNA and just God's blessing, no, that's a funny story. So I was working at an agency. That's where I got my start in the industry. I graduated. Entrepreneurship degree, no clue about where I wanted to be, just knew the type of place I wanted to be. And so when I got a chance to go to SEO, which I'd never heard about before in my life, I didn't even know it was a thing, went in-house to this agency and suddenly SEO was my job. And I found, in Canada, things kind of lag behind in terms of understanding and people really seeing the opportunity and things or being willing to invest in it. And so we were doing great work at the agency and I loved my time there. But one of the things that we'd come up against is getting people to see the practical value. And so I came up with this idea. I was kind of on GoDaddy. I was looking around at domains that were available and I saw bestlooking.man-in-the-world.com was available. I thought, no way. How can this be available? And so I scooped it up and I kind of thought, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if I'm going to put my SEO skills to the test, see if I can rank my photo to be the first thing. It was like the dream, right? I wanted to be the best looking man in the world according to Google. So I did the SEO thing and it worked. And I stayed. My picture was number one for like years.
It's just you and like the Dos Equis guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, Google, the ultimate source of truth, they highly vetted it. They really, there's symmetry analysis, all of that. But what it turned into, not only did it become a really cool thing and an easy way to show clients the potential, but eventually I got a TEDx talk out of it, which was pretty neat too, a pretty neat kind of side opportunity. So yeah, it was just one of those quirky things, one of those like knee-jerk things you do in an afternoon that became for a while a big part of my story and a big part of my career.
So how did you actually turn that into a TED Talk? So, right, you buy this domain. It's a really cool just talking point of this is the power behind search. Here's why it can be valuable to you. And then though, I love this because this is, I think, it's something I've noticed in successful people, right, is they take a moment of hilariousness, a joke, of luck, and they spin it into something that has multiplicative compounding effects for the rest of their career. So how are you able to take that domain, right, and then turn that into a TED Talk? Like, walk us through that experience.
It's a mix of like, I did the thing that I did that afternoon, and put the effort in and got it ranking, but it became this talking point. And so one of the philosophies I've tried to carry throughout my career is to never underestimate the power of a single connection, because you just never know. Like, all my biggest opportunities, best clients, they've all come out of a relationship. Somewhere I made a connection with someone. Usually we couldn't do anything for each other at the time, and it turned into something huge years later. You plant seeds and you never know what's going to grow. And so I got asked by a friend of mine. He had a sister, and she was planning this big trip. She was a social studies teacher here in Canada, taught at a girls' school, and she was tired of the kids having nothing but bad news to share in their current events part of their class. And so she decided she was going to do this multi-country tour to go find good news. And a friend of mine asked, hey, would you sit down with her? I know you're into this SEO stuff. I know you did this best looking man in the world thing. Could you give her some pointers on getting visibility on it? I was like, sure, why not? So we sat down at this stupid little Irish pub near my house, and I gave her some pointers, and we became friends through that. And so years later, after she'd done that trip, she obviously got some media attention for it. She got to do a TEDx talk. And then when it came time to put names forward for people who might be good to do that, she floated my name out there and used that example of the best looking man in the world as this kind of example of the power of the web and the power of perception, and things more from there.
No, I love it. And I think the last kind of follow-up around that, Joel, is you said, a lot of the relationships you got earned you some of your largest clients. Now, with that in mind, I recognize that HubSpot and Deputy are two of the largest clients you ever worked with. Did those come from relationships as well?
Where that came from is Matt Barbie and I had known of each other. We'd kind of floated around SEO circles.
And for the audience, guys,
was doing.
Matt is Director of Growth at HubSpot. Just a little background, and runs a thing called Traffic Think Tank. Sorry, Joel.
Yeah. But at the time, he wasn't Director of Growth at HubSpot. He was just a consultant doing his own thing. And so I saw the work he was doing. He saw the work I was doing, and we both appreciated the value that was coming forward. And I was in SEO at the time. So like I said, we had nothing, there's no way I could have helped him. And at the time, there wasn't really anything he could have done for me, but we just got on well. And then when he did go in-house with HubSpot, I was the name that came to mind when they needed someone to help them out with conversion stuff, and when they were going through this massive overhaul of their site. So that's where that came from. And, Deputy, I think they're a big client as well. That came through a referral as well. I think I can tie that one back to Barbie too. I think he was doing some work alongside them, some consulting with them. But it's not just that, like WP Engine, when I worked with them, that came through a friend of mine, John Henry Shirk, who before that was an SEO consultant with Seer and went on to be in-house other places. So you just never know where good people will wind up. And it's a mistake to be so short-sighted to only try to, network or make friends with people you think can help you. It's better to just go out there and make friends and be genuine and be interested and try to be interesting. And for me, at least, that's paid dividends in my career.
So that's like word of mouth. So you're talking to people, you're meeting people in real life. They later have an impact on you. But online, if you were to recommend to B2B leaders the best place to go to make these meaningful connections online, where would you direct them?
That's a good question, because the landscape is like shifting like crazy. In the early days, like so much of my network I can tie back to Twitter, because in its heyday, before it became this nauseating, crazy political landscape of outrage and everything's horrible, it was a really good place to meet people. These days, I make a lot of great connections in smaller, intentional communities. So two places I would say B2B leaders should look is, surprisingly enough, Facebook. There's a group for everything, every niche, every specialty. Some groups are better than others, but I make great connections there. And then kind of a rising trend, if you look at, we mentioned Traffic Think Tank earlier, but if you look at what they've done, Nick Eubanks and Matthew Barbie and Ian, they've built this really curated community of people who want to be there and want to have these discussions. And it's kind of focused enough that it's devoid of the other distracting nonsense. So Slack groups and intentional small communities, I'd say, are really becoming an important source of networking and communication now as well.
Yeah, one of the things, Joel, you talk about a lot too, though, is how much you're always impressed, I think, with LinkedIn from the posts. Like, instead of posting on your own blog now, the power of LinkedIn. I mean, maybe speak to that too from a sense of like people who might be trying to start their own thing, or maybe who are leaders in-house or at agencies. Like, how do you see the power of LinkedIn from a publishing, like a post perspective? Because I know you're pretty active on there and you do really well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So people often would publish on, say, Medium, right? Because Medium had the audience and you're just leeching off of that. And I think LinkedIn, if you look at the trajectory of what they've done over the past few years, they've gone from this like hated redheaded stepchild of a social network to being this incredibly active place. And it's popular to dump on LinkedIn because, yeah, there's a lot of dumb content on there. But my approach has simply been, I don't really blog on my own site that often anymore. I don't really have the time, but I'll go fire off an update on LinkedIn, and my only focus is to communicate something actionable in 3,000 characters or less, I think is their limit there. And my strategy is simply, I'll find a core idea, a fast tip, I'll communicate it there in its entirety. There's no link to download. There's no go to this link. It's just, here's something useful. Like in this ocean of like weird videos and like, I got fired and then I did this and things, like all these dumb stories. Just be useful. Put something out there that someone goes, hey, I could take that and apply it. And I've gotten some solid traction. I don't have the share numbers of some of the gurus, but I get a lot of good inquiries just trying to be genuinely helpful, no holds barred in their character limit or less.
Well, what's the key difference between if you're writing a post or just a comment on LinkedIn versus a Facebook group, or maybe you're writing an article or preparing a presentation like a speech? What's the difference in your copywriting process for those three different things? So social media, a blog post, or a presentation.
I mean, with LinkedIn, you have to have some copy chops because you're competing with a lot of noise. You've got to grab. So your first few sentences, they're incredibly important. You're interrupting because people aren't necessarily looking for what you're sharing until they become a follower. So, on LinkedIn, again, it's bite-sized, it's frequent. At my peak, I was posting every day, something small, something often. And then, when people follow up, just always taking the time to say thanks and try to foster a relationship that way. When I'm putting together, say, a talk or a presentation, and anyone if you haven't seen me give a talk at a conference or see me give a presentation, I'm kind of known for having really dense talks. I kind of like try to compress the ocean into a raindrop. But the goal there is, I want everyone in the audience, everyone who's listening in, to be able to take something away, regardless of their niche, their company size, their budget. There has to be something actionable in there for them that makes them sit up and go, hey, I can use that. And so my talks can be really dense. And then when it comes to, some of these communities, I think the big thing is just, you're going to focus on the work, and it's similar to LinkedIn in that you want to just be genuinely helpful first and not constantly pitching. But there, I think the goal is just be real. So have real conversations. If the conversation deviates a bit away from shop talk, that's okay too. But focus just on getting to know the people in the group and I guess being known. So the last thing I'll say on this is like, I deliberately seek out groups where I'm the belle of the ball. And what I mean by that is like, there are maybe a handful of other copywriters in all of Traffic Think Tank. And so when I open my mouth and share something, I own the floor. I'm not competing with 20 other writers all trying to pitch the same group. And I'm not even really pitching, but I stand out because I'm not, I don't fit the mold of everybody else that's in there.
I think one of the important parts, Joel, and this is something like data has screwed us up so bad. Like it really has. And what I mean by that is, as marketers, we literally decide that we're like marketing God and that we can put value on anything, and it's only valuable if we can directly correlate it to revenue, right? Like I'm only going to talk to my exact target market. And you're like, no, you should talk to anybody and love on them, appreciate them, honor them, respect them, help them, educate them, and you'd be amazed what can happen down the road. So like, how do you fight? Because by the way, working with Joel, he's freakishly intelligent and uses a ton of freaking data to get to his assumptions with his copy. And I was very, very impressed with that and just the experience of working with Joel. But as someone who's that data driven, how do you simultaneously ignore the data to build relationships? Like, what's that process like for you?
A shift that has to happen, and I don't know if it ever will, is recognizing that data is just clues. Data is not the whole story. You cannot compress everything on the planet into data, at least not in a way that we could ever hope to understand it. And I think one of the things that being specific to copy and conversion has taught me is that there's always room to be surprised, and there's always room for the human factor. There are things, we want hard answers from data. We want to know always exactly what worked, why it worked. And there's some things, when it comes to my role in particular, we can never know the why. We can ask people, we can try to get them to explain, but for some things, some tests will just never really understand why one thing went the way it did or not. But when it comes to relationships too, I think one of the things I've especially been learning as I get older, and especially now with a little guy, our son, is I'm starting to see again, like it kind of comes back to that thing I mentioned earlier. You just can't underestimate the power of relationships, because where we try to limit ourselves to data and conjecture and we want everything to be predictable, there's no way I could have predicted at the moment that I decided to take a Thursday night to go to a bar to teach someone's sister about SEO, that one day she would be the person who opened up TEDx to me, and by doing that, speaking in general. There's just this amazing, wonderful wild card factor of life where you can't track potential in data, at least not data alone.
You had this presentation 3 years ago where you presented to a bunch of 6 and 9-year-olds, right? About the power of saying yes. Is that like a principle you live life by? Like, cause I saw that whole presentation and I went through it. I was like, this is awesome, right? You're teaching like these kids essentially about life to a certain extent. And like your career doesn't have to look like college, job, die, right? Like it could be something different. Like, what are you saying yes to in 2019? Like as that guy, right, who started your whole career saying yes to stuff, what are you saying yes to this year? Like what's your focus going to be?
What's funny is the big thing that is happening for me this year is saying yes to saying no. I've gotten to the point where, I've said yes to so much and I've been so agreeable. And now I have to learn to turn things away and learn to focus. And so I think if I want to rephrase that a bit, this year I'm saying yes to focus, and I'm saying yes to letting go of the fear. We talked earlier, you were mentioning the shift in the landscape of like the lead volume and the things that are happening in your business, right? And there's this uncomfortableness that comes when you're closing deals and you're getting great work, to go, say, from this large number of leads to this smaller number of leads, there's some discomfort there. And I think for me, though, that's what I'm saying yes to. I'm saying yes to being uncomfortable. I'm saying yes to ruthless focus. I'm saying yes to some shifts in my own mindset. I think for myself, I hold a lot of limiting beliefs. There's things that, even if I didn't realize it, there are things that I would put a ceiling on myself. And this year, I guess I'm saying yes to being focused and yes to being uncomfortable with being focused and uncomfortable with going into new territory and places I've never been before. Because, for example, like the things that are happening with case study, they're presenting challenges I've never had to deal with before, navigate. There are mornings where I wake up and go, this is all really exciting, and I want to shut it down. But I have to, remind myself that I can do this and I can navigate this. And, why not me? Why can't I be the guy who's able to do that stuff?
You're talking about focus, but then we also know that you're the kind of person that has a lot of different projects going on at the same time, right? So how do you prioritize that? How do you know what you're supposed to, what's really going to drive the most value, what's worth working on right now as opposed to tomorrow?
And is like the KPI revenue, or like what's that KPI to you? Do you know what I mean? Like, because value, right, is going to be an intrinsic thing that's based on your principles and your values, right? So is value to you revenue? What is that value? Because it's okay if it is, right? Or is it something else?
It's a tightrope, because no matter how much I want to be like free spirit and like just do what makes you happy and all the motivational quotes with hashtags, you have to make money. There's freedom that comes with your ability to generate revenue, and it's hard to say no to. And I think that's part of what I got caught in for years, is I focused explicitly on revenue and what's going to make me the most in the shortest time. And Now, I'd be lying if I said revenue's not part of it. I think a big part of the reason that I'm trying to take the back half of this year and focus exclusively on case study is because I see a huge revenue opportunity there. But in the same breath, I think for me right now, one of the things that happens, and I'm going to say when you work by yourself or for yourself, but I think it happens to everybody if I'm honest, and you can confirm or deny, but it's easy to get complacent. And when you're in school, you're always learning something. You're always being stretched. When you're in business, unless you give yourself those opportunities to be stretched or embrace when that happens, it's really easy to get just kind of in a boring pattern of doing the same thing all the time. And so now part of how I evaluate opportunities is where am I going to grow and where am I going to be challenged and where is my next helpful skill going to come from? Because I don't want to just do the same work I was doing in 2015 today. I want to progress. I want to feel like I'm moving towards something, even if that something is just self-betterment. And so I think that's factoring more and more into my decisions today too.
A lot of us have gone through this where we'll start something and then we've seen another opportunity, right? And we want to kind of capitalize on that. And we keep seeing new opportunities come up all the time, new things we want to try. How do you know when to draw the line? How do you know when it's not worth it to keep trying to add on to it and just stick with what you have or to abandon it altogether? I mean, you talked about it's a fine line, but how do you know what the line is with something like that?
To be brutally honest, that's the hard lesson I'm learning right now is I have been the guy who, there's a shiny object over here. I'll do some of that and I'll do some of this and a little bit of everything. And, so at one point, if I was to rattle off at the end of last year, all the things I thought that I could be actively involved in and not want to sleep for a decade. I was working on business casual. I was working on launching an audit service. I was working on launching a revamp of something called the Pit. So this, landing page free assessment thing. I was working on case study buddy. I was working on speaking ideas. It was just too much, right? And I think that's one of the things I've been historically terrible at in my career is knowing where the line is. And so, when we talk about what are you saying yes to this year, that's why I say ruthless focus. I've taken this big nebulous list of literally 6 different things I thought I had energy and focus to do, had to learn the hard lesson that no, I'm not superhuman. There's a lot I can do. There's a lot that I can be really capable with, but I can't be excellent at anything if I'm just okay at 9,000 different things.
I think I've been lucky enough to not go horribly down that trail. I have one side project I do. The big thing I think, and this is also, for the listeners and everyone, is I think our human nature incredibly underestimates how difficult something is not to start, but to maintain, grow, or push past. And we devalue the amount of time it actually took to get where we're at currently and think it was a hell of a lot easier than it actually was.
It's kind of eerie. It's almost like, I don't know if I ever published this somewhere and you found it, but again, one of the philosophies that I have in business, and I learned it early, but just it's taken a lot of time to take root and I keep coming back to it, is the sentence that I come back to all the time is everything is harder than you think it will be.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Because early in my career, right, when I just started freelance writing and I thought to myself, hey, you know what if I subcontracted this to, I had 10 different writers all doing blogs and you make all these assumptions, right? Of course, everyone's going to have the same level of quality. Everyone's going to have the same process as I do. Everyone's going to care about deadlines. And then you get into it, you're like, this is 1,000 times harder than I thought it will be. And none of my assumptions were true. And I keep that front of mind now. Everything that sounds simple is harder than you think it'll be. And that's okay as long as you don't quit when it gets hard, because it will.
Yeah, don't be shocked, right? Don't become unaware and just be completely shocked by it. And that's a huge point. And I think, Joel, I have another pretty hard-hitting question here. Is it hard being a Calgary Flames fan? What's that like?
This year, it's real easy. They're second in the league, I think. So
is this the year? That's the question.
Flames year?
I'll start by saying this is the best Flames team I think I've watched in my lifetime. that being said, I think they're still a year or two away. I think, we've got a 3-year window. If they make it all the way this year, I'll eat my words, but I think they're close. I think they're a couple moves away from being there.
It's been 30 years. So, I mean, it's been a long time coming. So we wish you all the best of luck. We don't want to.
No jinxing here.
Yeah, we don't want to jinx you, but best of luck.
Why do marketing teams just devalue copy? Where did this whole BS thing of people don't read? Like, where did this come from? It just blows my mind that copy is so devalued. Even myself, I think I accidentally devalue it. Yet I'm one of its biggest proponents, entirely believe in it. Paid you, Joel's the man, okay? But Joel's also not the cheap guy in the space. Joel's worth every buck. I believe in copy, but why is that such a because you go back, right? Ogilvy, copy, that was his bread and butter, right? That was what advertising was. It was copywriting. You got into copywriting, and then at some point, we just forgot. Maybe walk the audience maybe through what you think happened and where we're at today and why it's devalued when it's such an important part.
I think there's a lot of reasons, and this is something that I've had to think a lot about, and especially in the early days of my career, I came up against it more. I think the first reason is that on some level, whether we admit it or not, everybody thinks that they can write. And why I say admit it or not, right? Everybody kind of thinks, well, I got a keyboard, I got 2 hands, I wrote an email this morning, how hard can it be? And people will actively say, the thing that's hilarious to me and also tragic is people who will tell you, oh, I'm just not a writer. I'm so glad, you're working on this because I'm just not a writer. And they'll say that in our first meeting. And then I'll send a draft and suddenly these people have opinions. Suddenly they're a grand master of copy because out of nowhere it's well, I don't like this word choice, or oh, but what about this headline that I thought up, right? I think on some level, even if we say out loud, I'm not a writer, or writing is hard, some part of us still underestimates chronically how difficult it is. I think the other thing, we can blame, it's popular to blame the client. A lot of freelancers, a lot of consultants get all uppity because, well, they just don't respect the process and blah, blah. But copywriters have done a terrible job of educating people on what that process actually looks like. We haven't done a good job of showing people what goes in to that headline, what goes in to that landing page, because when you treat your relationship with a customer like, okay, pay X bucks, get X amount of pages done, well, you're setting yourself up for a bad time, because in their mind, it's well, I paid X amount of money and the only deliverable coming out the other end is a page or an email or whatever. That's why when I go into relationships and when I talk to clients and when I'm vetting clients and when they're vetting me, I spend more time talking about how we're going to arrive at the copy, how we're going to get to the point that we can confidently write something. I get the whole team where I can involved in, here's what we found, here's what we're learning, here's why we're looking at this, so that they can see for themselves and appreciate that it's not about Don Drapering it and locking yourself in an office and drinking whiskey until inspiration hits.
That doesn't help.
There is creativity to this, but it's an analytical craft too. And so, yes, I think people just don't see that because it's not something you think about. When we call it research, it sounds like, nerd work done alone in a basement, not a super valuable part of a process. But copywriters themselves have to work harder to educate and to show people how we do what we do. It comes from both sides. You know what I mean?
Well, for the audience, I think if you can take away anything from Joel and kind of who he is, the thing that sets him apart really is that mindset of copy isn't just about guesswork. It's about data also. It's about making educated guesses. And so I wonder, as the people that are listening to this are likely B2B leaders that are wanting to improve their copy, what are the mediocre B2B companies doing in copywriting right now? What is the absolute you should avoid doing this, what most people are doing, but is totally failing?
The first thing, and it ties into what we were just talking about, so many B2B companies are so focused on design they'll design an entire website before they have even thought of what the message on that site's going to be. We're attracted to shiny objects and pretty pictures. Even huge companies, one of the worst things you can do, and I still see happening all the time, is, okay, yeah, we've got the site designed, so can you just plunk the copy in? And it's kind of like, yeah, we've designed the covers of the book, so could you just kind of fill in that empty space in between? It's sort of important. People don't think about it that way. So my biggest pet peeve, I still come up against it. I get it. With B2B, things don't move quickly until they do. But if you're not prioritizing copy early on, then you're making a huge mistake. If you're waiting until the bones are there to if you're treating design like the bones, if you're waiting until the thing's designed to bring copy into it, man, you've really dropped the ball. So that's really frustrating. I think the other thing is, especially in B2B, there's this real hesitation to do anything that doesn't feel familiar and safe. We see all kinds of recycled copy, and I can rattle off lines, and I bet you can think of 10 sites you've seen this phrase on this week. So let's just do that. So we take the time to get to know our customers.
Oh, yeah.
Every site has that. In
how about this one, Joel?
Right?
How about this one? 10x your business tomorrow.
We use a proven process. We care about our customers. So companies will play it so safe and be so afraid to say anything specific, to speak to any one group. Because like, well, if we only talk to these people, then we'll lose everybody else. Or if we're really specific, then what about and the thing is, they wind up talking to nobody at all. And that's common in small companies, big companies, mid-sized companies. It's like there's this boilerplate we all have in our minds that we draw lines out of. And it's like, yep, that feels comfortable. And we leave it there. And so the companies that are going to win are the companies that are going to take risks and listen to their customers and talk like their customers and do the unexpected. Because if you only play it safe, then you're playing it safe along with everybody else in your space.
Well, let's talk a little bit about pushing those boundaries then. Maybe some trends that you see going forward in copywriting that might be effective, something that would kind of push the boundaries as it currently stands that might not be so familiar, but that you'd be willing to try for your own site, for example.
Yeah, so I can't talk about who the client is, but like one of the things that I'm trying right now with a company in a space that you would not expect. So they're in a security space, online securities. That's what we'll say. We're breaking the fourth wall. There's this like unspoken relationship between us and a site where it's like, yeah, we're going to say the businessy things. And, if you're signing up for a demo, then the headline's going to be, requested demo. But what if that page said something like, finally a demo that won't bore you to tears? Or what if we just said the thing everybody wishes somebody would call out? Like, you don't want to talk to sales, so why not talk to this person instead? Or, hey, US-based support because talking to someone you can't understand sucks. Things like that, right? Like, what if you were so brazen as to just speak the unspoken thing? And I'm seeing that more and more. I mean, there's people who are really good at it. One of the people that I admire for her ability to wield humor in this way to say the unspoken thing is Leanna Patch. She's a conversion copywriter. She's kind of branded herself in the humor space. Not a one-trick pony, but I think her experience in things like improv and her experience in things like humor, there's a boldness and an ability to kind of like, it's almost like comedians that do, it's lifestyle commentary where they just say the thing and everyone in the audience laughs because they've all had that thought before, but no one's ever said it out loud. So I'm seeing more and more companies being willing to try that and to break convention and to kind of surprise people, with copy that is so to the point and so like what nobody else is saying that people take action because they're like, yeah, these people get me. They're saying the thing that nobody else is willing to say, but everybody's thinking.
Yeah, and I think, Joel, too, what we found, right, like we do a ton of like, instead of requesting a demo, we'll pitch a demo video and we'll gate it. So it's like watch, less than 5 minutes, no need to schedule, only reach out if you're qualified. Really taking the idea of there's just this like psychological just nightmare associated with hopping on bad demos. Like legitimately, like people hate demos. Like demos suck. Like usually it's boilerplate junk that's not relevant to you. They don't truly understand your pain point. You have to go 45 minutes to get to price at the end, which is all you really wanted, right? Like there's this attitude and this nature of people who aren't quite able. It's just so easy to say contact us or request demo. And I don't know where that came from, but it's such a consistent thing. So it's cool to see someone like yourself fighting it. Now, I did a little bit of research preparing for this, Joel, and you said back in the day that you should save at least 3 months before freelancing and really kind of going out on your own. Do you still believe that you need to have at least 3 months of kind of capital saved up, or do you think it's more or less? Kind of what's your stance on that?
So I was talking to freelancers and talking to people who are thinking about freelancing, talking to people thinking about going out on their own, starting a business. And the reason I said that and where that came from is, especially in copy, but I think it's come to a lot of niches, people just pull the ripcord, like, I'm doing it, I'm going for it. And sometimes you don't have a choice, right? Like if you get fired from your job or laid off or health circumstances, whatever, and you're thrust into it, you don't have the novelty. But if you've got a day job and if you've got, steady work, get excited about going out on your own and maybe start picking up projects on the side. But not having financial stability can put you on a hamster wheel that's incredibly hard to get off. So when you're picking up like chumpy gig work because you need to eat, and if your entire profile is full of this chumpy gig work.
Yeah, and you can't say no to the wrong clients, right? Like you're just kind of stuck, right? To a certain extent.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very real power struggle. And this sounds like it's us versus them, but it's not really. But there is a power dynamic between you, the consultant, and the client. When you look at the really successful people, and when you look at the freelancers who are doing really well, and when you look at the consultants who do really well, or the agencies who do really well, they've found a way to shift that dynamic. They've gone from being this like employee mindset where the client's going to come in, tell you what to do, tell you exactly how to do it, tell you what they're willing to pay. They shift the conversation away from that to, well, here's the level I'm on. And if you want to be on this level, here's what it's going to take. And here's how we're going to do it. And it's a subtle difference, but it makes all the difference in the world. But it's hard to do that when you don't have the financial means to say no, when you don't have the financial means to be confident. And so do yourself a favor, have that cushion so that you have the power of no, and you have the power to choose, because otherwise you'll get in this situation where you're forced to take stuff, and that's really hard to escape once you're there.
I noticed that you keep using the word no a lot. You've mentioned your focus is, or your what you're saying yes to this year was focus, but also saying no. So I want to know, in terms of copywriting, as it were, where does negativity fit in there? Specifically, we talked about pushing the boundaries. Is there any instance where negativity might actually be something that we can use in copywriting, or sarcasm, things like that, that are unexpected that we don't typically see in copywriting? Is there a place for that?
So the thing I'll say about sarcasm, international brands, you gotta be so careful. And I can say this because I'm German, heritage. But like, for example, Germany, sarcasm doesn't exist there really. Like, it's not something they know. So if you put something out there sarcastically, often they'll take it literally. I think negativity, it can exist. It really, you have to be cautious about, does it fit in your brand and are you using it tactfully? So for example, if you look at, say, Josh Garofalo, he's a fellow copywriter. If you look at his landing page, and he is very clear, and it ties back to something you were saying earlier, Garrett, he's very clear about who's a fit and who's not. He doesn't pull punches on who's not a fit. Like, he doesn't mollycoddle you and, maybe this might be the case. He's just like, either you're in or you're not. And when it comes to decision time, so let's say you're doing a launch, you're launching a new product or you're launching a new course. When it comes to the point of decision, being very definitive, being maybe even negative about who's in, who's out, who should do this, who should not do this, encouraging people. Weirdly enough, there was a study done that found that when you told somebody that they were free to refuse an offer, they were more likely to take the offer. When you tell people they've got the option to say no, when you're definitive about like, this might not be for you, that's when you can really close the deal. So I think there's room to be negative when it comes to you have to plant a flag. The other place is when you're taking a stand against something, and in doing so, you're communicating a value that the right people it's going to hit home with. So another example of this, you look at, obviously, a lot of people look at what Nike did with the Kaepernick kind of campaign as a positive thing. Some people look at it as a negative. There is a lot of positive and negative feelings surrounding that. But when you plant a flag, when you stand for something, when you take a bold stance on an issue, and in SEO, that might be taking a stand against the whole mentality that, an agency just adds another tab to their menu on their website, and now that's a service they offer magically, and they've never done it before, but now they got a page for it. When you take a bold stance, that can be polarizing. You can do it in a positive way. It can be perceived negatively. You can take a negative angle, but you can use negativity to kind of attract people who share your negative view on a value, on a subject, on whatever it might be. But you do have to be very confident if you're going to approach things through a negative lens. You got to be real sure that ideal customers are going to respond positively to that stance. If you're not sure, there are times where playing it safe does actually make sense.
The Copy Hackers, I think, does that really well. Like when you want to guest post, like for Copy Hackers, they tell you here's exactly what we won't accept, like essentially scaring people away, right? But the right person's like, oh, I got this. This is a challenge. I could write a piece of content that's good enough for that blog. I know exactly what they want, right? And so I think there definitely is a use case to appeal to your ideal customer persona by, I call it self-identification. In other words, like writing copy and developing brands, where this is just my take on copy, Joel, and I could be completely wrong. I'm no copywriting expert. I enjoy, I think it's an art and a science, but I always believe that clarity and appealing to your ideal customer persona, so when they see it, they go, oh my gosh, finally, like I've been looking for that. I think that's a powerful place to use your copy, is to be so clear to your ideal customer persona and be so confident in your total addressable market and the size of what you're going after and the economics of what you're trying to accomplish with your business, with your positioning, with your product line, that's a position of power. You know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, if we look at even for Directive, right? If we look at your homepage and the statement that we make there, you deserve more. That's not just something creative. We kind of huddled around a boardroom table and thought, oh, this sounds nice. In talking to your audience and in looking at the landscape, and what we're quietly doing there is appealing to a frustration. There are companies who know they deserve more. And now when the right people come in and they see that message, that's what we're shooting for, is that finally, right? And it calls back to what we were talking about earlier, trying to say the unspoken thing and put it out there plainly. So I think one thing too, and this also ties back to something we mentioned earlier, is you can't do that unless you have a process for getting to know the customer. You can't be effective like that if you're not doing the research, if you don't know how to build a research campaign for copy, if you're not pressing into that. That doesn't just happen. But that's what people don't understand, because another agency is going to look at your homepage and go, oh yeah, we can do a creative line like that. Guys, let's get together. And their homepage, 2 weeks from now is going to say, you deserve the best. And it's like, where did that come from? Like, is that going to work for your audience? Is that a claim that is in the back of their mind? No, you just took something, tweaked it up because now it sounds good, it's comfortable, and put it out there. You have no process.
And you came up with that spot. When you came up with that too, Joel, right? Like by seeing, you watched a whole proposal here and you were like, okay, I think when you saw, okay, all of that's for free. Like you spend how much time like giving them and I think that's where you were just like, okay, that makes sense. And like for us, when we drop the ball, cause we're not perfect, it looks really bad. Like you can't just say things like that and try to be the best and hold yourself to that standard, drop the ball. And people are just like, cool. You kind of got when you start saying bold things with your copy, you also have to be ready to back it up and eat the crap when you don't, because that's also a very real thing too, right?
Totally. Where that comes back to bite companies all the time. You would not believe how many companies I talk to, and internally they have this much of, oh, we're a service brand. We really take care of our customers. And then you go look at their reviews and none of that is reflected in reality. They don't even respond to negative reviews. I mean, you can't put messages. You can't say, oh, we're going to be the Zappos of our industry if that's your goal, then be the Zappos of your industry. But you can't say you're that and not be that. You're going to get eaten alive when it comes to people evaluating it. And so you can put attractive messages out there. You can like send conversions through the ceiling in the short term. But if you can't back that up, man, your revenue numbers are going to look great for a bit and horrible in the months to come.
I think that speaks to the importance of being genuine in your copywriting. I mean, am I right with like with directive, for example, if we make claims about we could back everything up, but also if we just make claims about things that we never even have discussed before, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and there's people like I always kind of see like there's kind of like these like low key like snubs of like, oh, like I know people like see our website and they're like, well, how do you come up with those stats? How do you even prove that? Like we had to build our own data QC platform that looks at every one of our clients, and we can see every one of our clients' data points in SQL, which goes into Sisense, and you can actually like see the numbers, across your whole portfolio what your average numbers are. And so the funny part I think too is like you have to be genuine, because if you're not, you're just literally somebody saying this number, right? And that the problem is we have so many people saying numbers that it's not even necessarily like some of the using numbers in your copy is actually starting to become, I think, less valuable. I mean, do you find that to be true, Joel, where number-based copy is almost losing effect because so many people are just making it up?
The challenge is that what companies do so poorly is justify the numbers. If you're going to throw a big number out there, throw a big number out there, but you better have some proof for it, right? Like with case studies, people look for the metrics. But once they see the metrics, then they want to know how. And if you can't fill them in on the how, then you're really going to struggle. To some degree, right? The lizard part of our brains, it's always going to respond. There's levers that from today until 100 years from now, we're always going to be able to pull. The way that we pull them might be different, and we'll develop skepticisms and heuristics. There's always going to be some new way to tap into that. So when it comes to numbers, I think numbers is one thing. I think there's still a lot of leverage in those as long as you support them. But like one of the things that's really getting written off fast is if you go through 10 different plumbers' websites and they all say best plumber in town, based on what, right? Like where does that come from? We're skeptical, and we have more access to information, and we can inform our own choices in different and better ways. So again, that comes back to being genuine. Whatever you're going to claim, whatever you're going to write, whatever you're going to put out there. And that's why people ask me sometimes, because I've written lots of agency sites. All these agencies, they all do SEO, they all do PPC, they all do CRO, whatever it might be. How do you find unique messaging for each of them? Because it's all the same thing, same service, yada, yada. There's something unique, though. My job is to get into the veins of the people in that company and find what separates them, find their message, find the way that they do things that no one else does them. And if you're just hiring a generic copywriter off the street, yeah, they're going to give you headlines like the boilerplate that you see on every other site, because they're not really taking the time to understand, to look at your audience, to get your process. And that's why we wanted to and insisted on, we wanted to listen to how you actually pitch and propose, because no one else is going to do that like you. And there's something in there that I knew there'd be something in there we could pull out.
No, I love that. And, I have my last question here, Joel, and this is actually going to be a recurring segment, but I did a little research, okay? And I found your first tweet. Do you know what your first tweet was? Do you remember it, Joel?
Oh, gosh. Be prepared. It's probably something embarrassing like hello, internet.
Okay, so I went back to March of 2010, and I found you tweeted out a tiny URL. The tiny URL still exists, by the way, and it redirected to YouTube to the social media guru video. Do you remember that?
No.
This is literally, this is like 9 years ago. And it was this whole video about how anybody can kind of claim to be a guru. And I thought it was such an enlightening thing, because I feel like you take such a hard stance against claiming to know something without actually having the authority, expertise, process to back it up. And so it was really kind of cool seeing how like that tweet from your very first time is still such a part of your character to today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I didn't tweet about my lunch. But on that point though, and this is something I am passionate about, and I do want to talk about real quick, in that, like, one of the things that I'm seeing in my own industry, but it's not unique to my industry, but there are people who they take Joanna Weeb's course or mastermind or whatever, and they take what they learn there, and do they go apply it? Do they earn their stripes? Do they actually win battles in the field? Do they come up against adversity? Do they get client wins? No. They repackage it, add in some woo-woo crap, and now they're an expert. And they sell these courses for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And I think the thing that really bothers me, we have such a culture right now that like everyone can be an expert and you should be teaching what you know. And like, I agree, like you should be teaching what you know. You should be sharing. There's a reason I go on LinkedIn and I share things, but when I'm sharing things, it's stuff that I've actually used. And so many people want to play the role of a thought leader. They want to play the role of the guru. There's this attractiveness to having a following and a big list, and there's money to be made in selling knowledge. But so much knowledge is not earned now. It's not stuff they've actually used. And I hear horror stories. There's people in the copywriting world, and I don't mean to be crass, but literally there's someone in the copy world who held a session on sales calls, and her advice to her listeners was to breathe through their vagina on a sales call because that was going to make them more powerful as they went through. Like, that is just patently bad advice. There's nothing of substance there.
It's not even physically possible.
I mean, for me especially, but you know what I mean? Like,
that is wild.
There's just these people coming into it where it's all hype and all packaging and all bluster, and they've never had to apply it or earn it or do anything with it. And it drives me crazy. And I'm cautious about the way I talk about this because I don't want people to think that I'm the gatekeeper, that like, oh, only Joel can decide if you're worthy to teach or not. But I'd encourage anyone in any field, business owners, B2B leaders, listen, there are a lot of people, they want to sell you on stuff. They want to sign your team up. They want to come in and teach. Okay, great. But look at their history and look at the work they've done. How long have they been at it? What have they failed at? What have they tried that hasn't worked? When they talk about their process, can they tie it in anything they've actually done? Not enough people ask questions. They get hit with the hype. They get sucked in by the bright lights and the nice wording. Have they done the work? That's what it comes down to, is have they done the work? Find out and hire and talk to and take counsel from the people who have. I know it sounds so mundane and so simple, but I do need to reiterate that point because we're just in this weird space and time where there are so many people that want to be experts and project like experts and have the social proof that makes them look like experts. But when you dig down into what they've actually done, they've never done anything other than making money, teaching other people to make money, which is ridiculous.
I think it's safe to say for the audience that, Joel, you are the kind of person that has actually earned his stripes, has put in the work, and that's why you are where you are today, not just by claiming. I mean, clearly by talking to you about these really in-depth things about copywriting, it's very evident that you understand it from a deep perspective because you've actually put in the work. So we are very thankful we were able to talk to you. This has been...
And can I give him a shout out?
I would love to. And we'll also give you a chance to talk about what you're working on too.
Yes. Yeah. So we got Case Study Buddy. Joel runs it. Awesome service where he'll actually go out there and build case studies for you. If you're wondering if you need them, yes, you need them. They help like crazy. It's been huge as Directives growth. Joel does an awesome job there. He also runs business casual copywriting, world-class copywriting service. We've actually paid him, used him at Directive, completely helped change our pipeline. We're generating larger average order values that are more qualified. It's been a huge part. Is there anything I'm missing here, Joel?
No, I would just kind of dovetail on that and say, like, Case Study Buddy is, we've got a great team and we've got passing. We've handled all the stuff you're thinking, all the objections you have, like, oh, we're under NDA, or our clients will never sign off, or, oh, this will take forever, or, oh, nobody's willing. We've dealt with it. That is where I've been ruthlessly focused on helping us get better. And other than that, no, I think you nailed that. I really appreciate the kind words, and I'm so happy to hear that you guys are seeing results with the work we did together. And it's really exciting to me when a project goes so well and when great people get great results on the back of relationships like that. So that's really encouraging.
Well, hey, Joel, thanks so much for being on the show. We're glad to have you, and have a great rest of the day.
Cheers, you guys too.
And now it's time to switch from a B2B mindset to P2P. That is peer-to-peer. I'm going to be interviewing people here at Directive Consulting, my peers, my colleagues, to try to find out what makes them tick, to see where they come from, what their goals are professionally, and give you an idea of what the culture is like here at Directive. It's going to be a really interesting opportunity, and maybe you'll even find people that have your exact same job title, your same position, or your same goals, or maybe they just like the same music as you. So today I'm going to be talking to my desk buddy, Byron. Hey, Byron.
Hey guys, what's up?
How you doing?
I'm good. I am.
He genuinely
good.
looks good. He's happy.
I am happy.
Just got done playing a game of pool.
That's right.
Awesome.
I lost, but it's okay.
That's the least shocking thing.
Yeah. No, I suck at pool, so it's not shocking.
Cool. Well, I've got some good questions for you, Byron.
All right, I'm ready.
I want to hear your entire career story.
Okay.
You have 30 seconds. Go.
30 seconds. Okay, so I studied and majored in marketing. Got a job right out of college working as a marketing coordinator for a construction company. Not as fun as you think. You think it's gonna be fun, but it's not. It is something else. And then did some freelancing after that job ended. Social media is definitely was my strong suit and something that I focused on. But post freelance, I took a job at a digital marketing agency, a very creative spot. Creative first, aesthetics first over data. It was cool. It's definitely that agency life of, coming in sweats, do your thing, get out of there. Worked with a lot of cool brands, a lot of name brands, mainly in the street world, street market stuff. So a lot of sneakerheads and a lot of brands like that. And then did that while also doing some freelancing. I still do freelancing from time to time, just whenever I feel like it and whenever I see like a cool opportunity. But post that, I am now here at Directive Consulting.
How many years in marketing?
How many years? Well, I did. I started off. I did my freelancing social media stuff mid college, and that was about 2015, give or take. I don't really remember the year because
It was so long ago.
It was so long. I'm freaking old.
You're so old.
I'm so old. But yeah, no, that started, I think, around 2015. From that point, I had a social media account that kind of grew pretty big before the algorithms. I just want to point that out. So it was definitely cool organic stuff. But it was definitely a weird time. Context, that social media account was focusing on goats. So it ranked up to like 30K, got featured on New York Times. It's pretty cool. Don't do it anymore. Kind of just got over goats and social media, but yeah.
So ultimately, though, your dream is to have a goat farm.
Actually, no.
Oh.
I know, it sounds a little...
So long term, what are we thinking?
Long term? Okay, so here's where I'm at. Moved to France. Southern France particularly. Spent some time there and loved it, and it's definitely my vibe. So basically, I just want to live there, wine and cheese all day, do my thing, I don't know what that is.
No career.
Oh yeah, no. Hopefully, no career. Somehow I come into some good money.
Nice.
Basically, I think that's what everyone wants. Just
you could sell plasma, a lot of plasma.
That's what I heard. There's good money in that. Yeah. Currently, I'm doing bone marrow, but yeah.
Some big goals with this guy.
Yeah.
No, Byron is a super cool guy. It's a pleasure working with him at Directive. Hopefully we'll have you back on again for another little spotlight, but yeah, this was good. Just a tiny little.
Hey, I am glad to be here. I am
supporting the company.
I'm just honored to be on this podcast and to work alongside Blake, and I'm having fun.
Thank you for listening to Yours in Marketing. I'm Blake Emmel. If you would please do us the favor of subscribing to the podcast if you found value in this, and tell your friends, tell other B2B leaders, tell people that need to hear about this. If you have a website, if you are in marketing or out of marketing, if you just want to learn how to build your website, how to build your business online, or if you just want to learn more about interesting people in general in the B2B space, please subscribe to the